Okay, basically, November 9th of 2014, I bought a Robo3D printer. So, you can kind of see there. And, this is the repaired version. I'll walk you through the history of this a little bit. It happens to be December 6th of 2014 right now. First item I printed using the spool of free filament, 300 gram spool of blue they sent, was this comb. And to give you a reference, a size, that's a Sharpie marker, and here's some like chapstick stuff, Blistex. And this was a stock print they had on it. Now, everything I printed here, or this is, let's just say this is on medium setting, and pretty much stock infill, like 25% infill, I guess. But again, the print was easy. This is the first one I did, and it went, like I said, really, well. This was my first object I've ever 3D printed. And like I said, I didn't have to calibrate the machine or anything. It just automatically bed leveled. I mean, it actually went surprisingly well. I was, really expecting to have a bunch of headaches, with 3D printing when I bought my first 3D printer, but this printer worked really well right out of the box. I mean, no calibration, nothing. I hadn't had to tweak anything at all to get it to run. I mean, this is really literally the first thing I attempted to print was this, and like I said, it actually came out pretty well. Of course, I was pleased with myself, having it being the first object I ever 3D printed, so I thought that was kind of cool. But then, let's see, the next object I printed with this same filament was this little whistle here, which has a ball in it, if you can hear that. And it doesn't really work, but I think some of the reason for that might be the software itself, but I'll get into that in a little while here. Let me try to adjust the camera here so it's not blurry. But yeah, that object, was on medium setting too, and so this comb I think took, I can't remember if it was, it wasn't too long, that's why I chose it, I guess I could like recompile it and tell you, but it pretty much took the stock amount of time to set it, which is, like I said, right around an hour or something like that, maybe less than an hour, and I know this took less than an hour to print it. But my history's gone on these older objects, so I can't look it up for you like I'm going to on some of these other things. Then, I tried printing my sphere, and of course the filament started giving me problems, at this point in the print. So basically this is as far as this print got, and it seems like I tried printing something else too, but I don't have it around here. But I started looking on the internet, and supposedly that filament they send you is actually pretty bogus. Even they recommend don't use it. I mean, I guess they got stuck with like a bunch of it when they first went into business or something, and it's actually not good filament. So, they even advise you not to use it. But I stopped using it after this. I threw a desiccant pack, a silica gel desiccant pack in its package and in a Ziploc bag and boxed it up. I don't know if I'll ever touch it again. Because it really, after this, I couldn't even get prints to really start with it, I don't think. But, I just decided to not take the risk. I had a bunch of other filaments that I bought, and I was like, well, I don't want to be having a bunch of failed prints like this, because I'm trying to use free filament, that's not very good. So anyway, that you know, ended my use of the blue filament, which was the starter filament, so I still got quite a bit of it left. Again, I unfortunately don't have the statistics on most of these. Well, actually I do. Let's see, where did I put that? Oh, right here. Now I can tell you how much filament, if I can find my magnifying glass. Let's see, okay, yeah, in fact it took, to do the comb, it took 1.5 hours to do that, and it used 22.23 grams of filament with the 25% infill. The whistle took 37 minutes and used 6.69 grams, because you really should log your filament, you know, but you can weigh it, you know, they're you know, if you have an accurate scale, you can like weigh it to make sure you're not running out. But you really should keep like a print log of how much filament you use, so you have some idea when you're running low on filament. But then my globe took, I don't know how long it actually took, because, you know, we only, you know, reached 30% before it failed. But anyway, after I went to the next filament, the next thing I tried to print, you know, was this. And again, everything I showed you so far is on medium setting, you know, medium quality setting. But this is the actual finished version of this. So this is when I switched to the Hatchbox filament, which I got for like $20 a kilo on Amazon. So, and you know, it completed, and you know, again, you know, I don't know, you know, since this is my only experience with 3D printers, I'm actually thrilled with the quality. You know, to me, I mean, you know, and I mean, most of my interest in actually printing things 3D is just to actually do prototypes on parts that eventually will be injection molded, but at least allows you to do some, you know, to give you some idea of the fit of the parts and the feel of the parts, and to make sure your dimensions are all right. To me, that's the value of 3D printing, because of what I want to do with it. You know, you don't want to commit to, you know, $10,000 to tool up a part. You know, it's going to be injection molded, and, you know, in fact, actually a series of parts, you know, like 3 or 4 that may have to fit together. So you may be, dishing out 40 or 50 grand for some injection molded parts, but, you know, if you get them in and they don't quite fit right, and, you know, or at least, you know, if you get them in and it doesn't have the look or the feel even, you know, or the clearances you might be needing, you know, for whatever you're going to do with the part, well, then guess what you get to do? You get to spend, you know, 50 grand doing it all over again, you know, with a redesign. So, and wait, you know, quite a while on top of that. You know, 3D printing, you know, you can get in here and actually test a lot of your parts ahead of time, even though they're not going to be as precise, you know, and you got to, you know, from an engineering standpoint, you got to be aware of that, you know, the precision restrictions, but you can still learn a lot with a 3D printer. That's one of my main interests, you know, in 3D printing, is being able to rapid prototype things and try a bunch of what-if scenarios. And for that, you know, it's fine with me. You know, this is all PLA filament too, by the way. I've not printed with ABS yet. But I know ABS you can smooth over with acetone and give it a nice finish and stuff like that. Supposedly, I was reading on the internet, there are some chemicals, you know, that will work with PLA, but they're supposedly pretty toxic, so I don't know. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that, you know, if there's, you know, any way of smoothing out the ridges. But again, for most of my, you know, requirements, you know, this is, you know, adequate, even at medium quality. I hadn't printed anything at high quality yet, you know. It just takes too long, so, I mean, I just hadn't wanted to mess with it. You know, and this is really acceptable for most of what I want to do. Now, I don't know if you can sand this or not, but I assume you can. It feels hard enough to where it can be sanded if you really needed to. But again, at any rate, the fact of the matter is, this sphere, you know, went great. I was pretty pleased with it. And then, let's see, okay. And the next thing I printed was this, a little, you know, set of gears, you know, that I got off Thingiverse. You know, this thing I designed, so this was actually my design, and I just threw it together in like 3 minutes on Rhino, so that was the first 3D part I ever designed and printed, so that was kind of a thrill. But this little gear thing, you know, I printed out, I got this off Thingiverse, but it's really hard to turn. You know, and the reason it's hard to turn, you know, and I have sanded it down a little bit and so forth to make it a little easier, but it's actually hard to turn because the matter control software that I printed this off of, actually, if you actually just run it with a matter engine, the parts are actually too fat. You know, it makes the gears about 20 mil too wide or so on each side, which a mil is 1/1000th of an inch, in case you're wondering. So, you know, as a result, your tolerances aren't too great, you know, but the other engines, like Cura engine and Slice 3R, look like they might have much better tolerances, at least on the previews. The problem is I haven't been able to get those to print yet. Supposedly there's a new software release, version 1.2.0, which fixes those problems, but I haven't been able to get it to install yet, but I haven't tried too hard either, because I've had my hands full with other things, as you'll see here in a minute. But this little keychain here, let's see, I think I got a record of it. You know, that sphere, by the way, took, you know, was 50 grams of filament, and I put it at 10% infill, and it took, you know, 3.5 to 4 hours, something like that. Let's see. But at any rate, you know, but anyway, software issues, one of the great things about this Robo3D is that it is open source, so you can actually use Cura with it and other products that are freeware and are open source out on the market, you know, or out on the internet if you want to set it up with another machine. But right now I'm still just using matter control because it gets the job done. I mean, it's not a terribly bad program. I mean, you know, some people say, hey, that sucks, you know, but I mean, you know, honestly, it's freeware. What do you expect? You know, really, I mean, it's freeware. You know, you're not going to get open source software out there right now that's all flashy and everything. In fact, I doubt that you ever will, honestly. You have too many cooks in the kitchen, you know, with open source. So you're not likely to ever get perfect software, you know, certainly in my opinion, but I still think it's a decent little program for what it does. I mean, you know, and again, as I get more into it, you know, maybe I'll switch to another software package at some point, but, you know, I'll keep using this as long as it's doing the job for me, you know, and I've, you know, basically been fairly happy with it so far. Yeah, certainly there's some bugs, it does crash sometimes, and, you know, but it's actually been fairly stable with all things considered, with the exception that if you try to, you know, change certain, you know, change your engine, you know, your slice engine on it and so forth. But anyway, these prints all went well. But then I printed this little house that I downloaded off Thingiverse. Now this sucker, oh hell, I got the light on still. I wonder if it's all blurred out. This sucker, you know, you can see these little dark spaces on it. Well, that's actually a sign, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it's a sign of a leaking extruder. So, which if you see the rest of the video or the other videos, I haven't decided if I'm going to edit this all together or have it as separate videos yet. But, you know, I go through the repair steps to take care of that problem. But like I said, you know, it's kind of hard to see in this camera. Let me turn my light up. It's kind of hard to see in this camera, but, you know, there's quite a few, you know, charred inclusions in it, and that's actually turns out to be leaking off the top of the extruder heater block. Didn't realize it at the time. This little house, by the way, was 32 grams, and I don't have a time for you on that one. So it took a while to print, though, I do remember, but not too terribly long, but it did take a while, like a couple hours or something like that. Let's see. Then the next thing I tried printing, and again at the time I still didn't realize what was going on with this thing. Let's see. You know, I tried actually printing out some things like this, and I don't have the times or anything. I know this little thing got off Thingiverse, and it's supposed to be free bearings, you know, that unlock. I had to dig all this stuff out, but again, with that matter control, printing everything too fat. Because what will happen, you know, on my version of it anyway, again, hopefully they got this fixed, is that let's say you've got an object, you know, like a box, Okay, and this is what you want. These are your actual ideal dimensions. Well, the software, when it's printing filament on this thing, should actually, because the filament, when it's extruding, has a width to it, right? And here would be the center line right down there. Well, this width should match with your border. So, in other words, it should print it like this in anticipation of how wide the filament is going to be when it extrudes, when the melt extrudes out of the head. The problem is it's not doing that. Right now what it does, more or less, is actually print the filament on the line. So it makes your part wider than it should be, clear around, in all directions. So it makes your parts actually fatter. And that's why, like I said, on that thing, the gears didn't mesh right. And they sure as heck didn't mesh right on this part that I tried printing afterwards. None of these gears actually mesh right. In fact, I can't even fit this together. And this is after a considerable amount of filing and sanding before I kind of finally figured out what was going wrong. There's no problem with the file or the parts or anything. It's just that the gears were all too fat. So these won't mesh together because this little gear here is supposed to go right in the middle of it. And it's supposed to go in the middle of this, which you can see this too. Because this actually is like the next part I printed, or one of the next parts I printed after this. And you can see just how bad these inclusions are. That's when I really started getting serious about, hey, I got a problem, because these were all big bumps. It's like garbage that was dropped onto it. But anyway, these gears here are actually supposed to fit inside this and roll around. But of course, that's not going to happen with that being too fat. Again, supposedly they got that fixed, but again, I still have not yet gotten the software to run yet. I wanted to do this video first just in case I accidentally delete my history on it, because I want to be able to tell you the stats on some of these parts I printed. But at any rate, this is, clearly a problem, and then I did, a reference cube right after that, trying to see if there was an extrusion leak on it. I was trying to investigate it, and one of these did have, you can see an inclusion in it. This, of course, I actually sat there and watched this thing the whole time I printed it, which took, 10 or 15 minutes, whatever it was. But, of course, that time it wouldn't do it because I was trying to figure out where the melt was actually coming from. Because on the surface, again, since you can't in the Robo3D get a good view around your printer, it's kind of hard to see where at first where the melt was actually coming from. Because the shroud gets in the way, so you just can't get a good view. Tried printing out another gear, and it had some problems with it. So, right, like you can see right there. But at any rate, at that point, I realized I had a problem. So, but I still went ahead and printed this out off Thingiverse just for the heck of it, which is you can kind of see the scale here. Which is a cityscape. That I got off Thingiverse. But boy, I'll tell you what. It's hard to see with a camera, but there are a lot of inclusions, and this is the biggest one. This big black booger thing, In fact, there are actually several of these in here, but it's kind of hard to see with this camera. But, there's a lot, of inclusions, 20 or 30 or more at last count. And you can even see them on the bottom, too. I mean, they're embedded throughout this thing. So this extruder was really leaking big time. It took about... this city took, over about, I think, 11 hours to print, and it's, again, on medium quality, and it used 141 grams. So basically, this was the last thing I tried to print. And at that point, I said, this just ain't going to work. I mean, because I really, I'm printing in red just because I bought red just to kind of get the feel for it with. And some miscellaneous colors, but I really want to print in white. Well, I don't want a bunch of black things in my white prints, so I got a bunch of white filament that I intend to print with. So, I mean, this had to be resolved. So what I did was, anyway, I got on the internet with Robo3D tech support, and they, this guy named Jerry, tried helping me out, and basically... you know, the only reason, you know, because when I bought this thing, you know, I'd read the reviews and I was skeptical about it, and I was like, man, you know, if this thing has any kind of leaking extruder or any kind of noisy fan, and it did, you know, that's the first thing I noticed when I plugged it in, is how the fan sounded. It sounded sick. I mean, it'd make noises like this. It would go, you know, it just do crap like that, you know, all the time. And at first, man, I thought somebody was, you know, cutting plywood down the alley or something. I didn't know where that noise was. That's exactly what it sounded like, because it would, you know, there'd be a slight hum that comes in. It sounds like a saw cutting through wood every now and then, and be like a, you know, it's hard to mimic. But the fact of the matter is that every now and then, you know, it'd make a sound like that, which is actually a sign of, I believe, fan blades actually rubbing against the fan shroud. But anyway, basically, and the other noises it's making, you know, are a sign that you're going to have bad bearings. I mean, it's clearly a bad fan. So I was like, oh shit, you know, I mean, that's what's going to happen. You know, they said they have a bad fan and the extruder leaks. You know, so when I got that, that's why I decided to do all these prints, because I wanted to stress test this thing right after I got the printer, so I can, you know, got 30 days to return it to Amazon, right? So, you know, I wanted to make sure of it. But the thing is in the process, I actually kind of fell in love with the thing, because it was so easy. I mean, at the end of the day, I thought these 3D printers were going to be a damn nightmare, because all the calibration and, you know, no, you got to use different temperatures for different filament colors and all this other crap. You know, I've been studying this 3D printing industry for, you know, since, you know, summer of 2014. So, you know, I really had kind of low expectations for it. But, you know, this thing does automatically bed level. I've never had to calibrate it or anything so far. But at any rate, it's because of that I decided to say, oh, well, you know, I'll give these guys a chance. But, you know, but I'm going to light a fire under their butt, you know. You know, so like I said, you know, I like this printer enough, though, to where I was willing to go ahead and repair it. Kind of looked into it a little bit, what I could find out on it. And I was thinking, you know, it doesn't look that hard, you know. But again, for me, you know, being an engineer, it's you know, kind of a relative thing. But then again, I don't like things to be a pain in my ass, and I shouldn't be having to fix a printer that, you know, I just got in a week. You know, was kind of why I'm fuming. I mean, but the fact of the matter is, you know, because they did say they had the problem fixed before I even purchased one. But the fact of the matter is, they still had some bad inventory floating around on shelves out there, like Amazon. So you may have received a bad printer. But I can tell you the problem is fixed. At least their new extruders are certainly do work. They don't leak. And I'll go into that here shortly. So anyway, if you watch my other videos, you'll see that I went and replaced the extruder, and I actually show you step by step how to do it and everything and what I had to go through. But since then, you know, which I completed that a few days ago, since then I've been running stress tests on it, because I needed to go through it all again, you know, while I can still send this thing back, you know, to make sure that it's worth keeping, you know. But the good news is, yeah, it is worth keeping. When I first fixed the extruder, and you'll actually see that on the videos, although it was cut short because I ran out of batteries. But one of the first things, let me get some of this stuff out of the way here. One of the first things I printed, you know, which you actually kind of see that happening, was this little dog tag off of their library. So that thing, you know, just took a few minutes. I could probably tell you how long it took here. Damn it. Let's see. Yeah, it took 21 minutes to print this thing out, and I don't know how much filament it used, so, you know, I couldn't venture a guess. But anyway, that print looked good. There's no black spots in it, but then again, I wouldn't have expected any black spots, because like I showed you before, I went through quite a few things before I got black spots. So I knew I was going to have to print quite a few objects. The next thing I printed was this, and it's something I designed. You know, it's a little cap, a little lid that goes in a piece of iron bar. I'm not going to go into the details of what it's for. But, you know, this didn't take too long. I mean, I don't know, like an hour or something like that. Well, actually, I can tell you how long it took. Yeah, it took 27 minutes to do this end cap. So, and again, I think I used 25% infill and medium quality setting on this. So just like this dog tag, that was stock settings. No changes at all. Then after that, let's see, the next thing I believe I printed was this. Another part I designed, and again, same specifications, and it's all PLA. This is medium density, and it took 32 minutes to print this thing, and again, for scale reference. But it took about 32 minutes to print this thing. Then, let's see. Then I did this, which is a little knife. I was actually just trying to test the properties of the VLA. I thought this would be a little more flexible than it is, but this little knife I threw together, I was trying to test an idea. That took 24 minutes to print this. So then I printed, actually I printed the pyramid before that. This pyramid took 53 minutes, and I think it's like a 20% infill, something like that. So, it's a solid. Then I printed this, which took 1.5 hours. So, pretty different lid rings. Then I printed, this, which, for scale reference, it's a fairly substantial print. So, but this thing had, again, I think about 20-25% infill, something like that. Yeah, about 20-25% infill. Again, medium quality. And it took about 3.5 hours, 3 hours 29 minutes. Then I printed this, and same specifications, and it took about 35 minutes. Then I printed let's see, oh yeah, this, which is 1 hour and 3 minutes. This is a larger version of this. It's thin-walled. I actually made that hollow about as thin as I could. Well, I don't know if it's as thin as I can get it, but it's pretty darn thin. So, like a pagoda pyramid. Anyway, the point is, again, I'm really just running stress tests on these things. That's why I'm printing all this stuff. Then I printed, and this took 3 hours and 20 minutes, I printed this. So, which again, for a scale reference. So, and that, I think it was down to like, well, no, this actually has a 25% infill, but here, I actually used low quality on it. And in fact, actually, I used low quality on this too. If I recall correctly, yeah. On these last few parts, I decided to start experimenting with low quality, with low quality instead of medium quality. So, these last few parts I did, I think that pyramid, and some of these objects were the last things I did medium quality. Everything else from now on has been low quality. This was on a low quality setting, so was this. So that's why it was, probably a little faster than you would think. But these were printed low quality. And then the last object I printed, and this took 7 hours, 57 minutes, again on low quality, is this. So, for reference. So, it's, the largest volume item I've printed so far. So anyway, but basically I printed all the stuff I've just showed you, after the dog tag with the fixed printer, and no problems. And I inspected the thing, no sign of leaking at all. And the fan sounds great, the new fan sounds great, etc. So it looks like, you know, everything's good to go. I mean, it's got my sign of approval. I'm sure there'll be other problems with it, you know, 3D printers, you know, and the state of the industry and so forth. I don't know how robust they'll be in the long run, but the good thing is it's simple enough to where it's repairable. And that's the thing about it. If you follow my videos, you know, on repairing it, you know, if you have the same problem too, it's not too difficult. And like I said, if you don't want to solder, you know, they do send you a full length of cable, and you can go through replacing the old fan cable with the new fan cable to change out your fan, which is recommended. But you know, at the end of the day, it was way less of a pain in the ass than I thought it would be. But again, the printer itself, I'm happy enough with to where I think it was worth it, because you know, it has been a pretty decent little printer. I mean, I've got to admit, you know, that I was surprised enough, because again, I really was very stern about that, you know, when I said, man, if that printer comes in and has a bad extruder, especially when I heard that it's fixed, you know, I'm going to be pissed, and I will send the damn thing right back. I will not think about it twice. But again, I just kind of fell in love with the thing, because, I mean, it was so easy to use. Way less of a nightmare than I thought it was going to be. You know, it was no Makergear or Makerbot, not Makergear. I mean, but it was no Makerbot or, you know, or even a DaVinci, you know, which supposedly you got to calibrate that right out of the box and everything. Well, this actually didn't need it. And since you can actually use several different, you know, many different types of filament and so forth, again, I'm using the Hatchbox cheap stuff with all this, you know. I've been pretty impressed with that. You know, $20, 1 kilo full of filament. It's a pretty good deal. So, you know, so far I'm very happy, and this is, you know, after several weeks of experience with the thing. You know, again, because, you know, I bought it on the 9th of November, and it's the 6th of December now. But I just completed my stress test yesterday, so, but I'm kind of making this, and, you know, the next project I have is I got to figure that software out to try to, you know, get that problem to stop happening, so I can do a little more precision with it, because this, you know, really should break off. But like I said, if you print anything that has any, you know, with the software being like it is, you know, that has any kind of, you know, in fact, you can see it here. I didn't realize, but that actually put, you know, some supports in it. But there's just no way you can carve that out, because it makes everything too fat, so everything bleeds together. So that's why this, you know, is supposed to break loose. It's supposed to be a needle bearing, but there's no way you can break that loose. You know, everything's glued together basically inside of it, because it's too fat. It's printing too fat. So, but at any rate, that's the next project I'm going to try to get to, and I'm sure there'll be a solution for that. So, but at any rate, I still say that I would recommend, you know, that if you have this problem, that you watch the repair videos. But I just wanted to do this video ahead of time so you can see that in the end, yeah, the problem will be fixed. And I also wanted to give you some data on timing, because I know a lot of people that are thinking about buying a printer are curious how long it, you know, it takes to, you know, print certain objects. So, you know, like I said, this one, you know, better part of 8 hours. So, you know, the point is, you know, that gives you an idea. But I still say, for the price and everything, you know, if you're new to 3D printing, and hopefully, again, you know, hopefully you won't get one with a bad extruder in it like I did. And if you do get one that, you know, I have read some reviews that say, oh, I got a printer and I went through calibration and everything, couldn't get it to work. Well, you know, maybe it got racked in shipping or something. My advice would be send the damn thing back. You know, try to buy it through Amazon, you know, so you can send it back. Because I don't know if Robo3D would do that for you. But my advice would be to buy it from Amazon or somebody that will accept returns. Send it back and get another one. But I think the machine is worth it. You know, I mean, it's actually a pretty nice little machine at the end of the day. I'm real impressed with what these guys did, especially given the rough start they had on Kickstarter and everything. And, you know, and it certainly irritated a lot of the backers. But, I mean, the thing about Kickstarter is that, you know, you're buying a first article, you know, from a company that has not gotten the bugs out of their products yet. I mean, when you invest in Kickstarter, you're taking that risk. You just are. You know, because frankly, it's not been in production, and all first product articles are likely to have bugs in them, likely to have problems. And, you know, you got to remember, you know, when you're on Kickstarter, even if somebody, you know, gets way more money than their goal is, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be wealthy, because most of these guys aren't experienced manufacturers, you know, like I am. You know, they don't know. They haven't been around the block, you know, a few times like I have. But I know what they're going through because I've been a manufacturer. You know, I was a JIT manufacturer in the electronics industry for 8 years. You know, I ran a company that did that. But I do know what they're going through. I do have some clue. And, you know, those first 2 or 3 years, they're brutal on you. They're brutal on you. You know, you're going to be running around with your, you know, head cut off. You know, you really are. I mean, you're just going to be bumping into walls left and right, and they're going through that learning curve, you know, and I agree their tech support could be better. I mean, you know, but I know, you know, their tech support, you know, is pretty overwhelmed, and, you know, and they're just going through the growing pains. I mean, they're trying to get into Costco and stuff, and they have to. It's a survival issue at this point in the state of the industry. So, from my standpoint, you know, I'm willing to overlook some of these things because I know what they're going for. But I do think, I mean, I know what they're going through, but I do think they have a good product. I mean, honestly, I do. And I don't own stock in it, and I've never met these guys in person. I mean, I really, just like you, dealt with them through tech support, you know, and it takes them 2 or 3 days to get back to you on the emails and stuff like that. But I have no idea how many emails they have to process in one day, and I think it's just this one guy that does it there. So they haven't even gotten to the stage where they can get somebody set up to handle tech support properly. And I just guarantee you these guys are scrambling with their head cut off. And you may think, oh, they've been at it for a couple of years. Well, you know, they've had a lot of technical problems if you actually look into their printer. I mean, just from their Kickstarter backers. I mean, my God, you know, when I first started looking into them the first of this year, you know, I saw that Barnacles video and everything, and I was like, holy hell, there's no way I'm touching that damn thing. You know, with all, you know, if I'm going to have to freaking go and do all that kind of repair work to get the thing working okay. You know, even though he did. But, you know, I contacted them earlier this year, and they said they had that fixed because I noticed that the video was actually... the Barnacles video actually came out there like mid to late last year or something, so I figured I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. But, you know, I do tend to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, as long as I have enough pressing reason to do so. And, you know, they said the problems were fixed, but I still said, well, I'm going to wait, you know, for a little while longer before I make a purchasing decision, you know. So, you know, but basically I came across these Extruder reviews. I was like, holy shit, really? You know, come on, guys. You know, but, you know, again, you know, I'd heard that it was fixed, so I decided to go ahead and take a chance on it. But, you know, sure enough, you know, they still had some bad inventory out there on some shelves, you know, and I was afraid of that. But I took a chance. But again, I liked the thing so much, it was worth going through the repair on. And if nothing else, you know, my attitude, you got to understand, was this. This was my first 3D printer. If nothing else, hell, at least I learned a little bit about 3D printing. So if I go out and buy a DaVinci or whatever, even though I'd rather not, you know, given their practices of bricking people's printers and having chip filaments and being a proprietary platform and all that crap, you know, doesn't turn me on that much. But it's not like something that's repairable, and at this stage in the game, you never know who's going to last. You know, who's going to be the distance before the Chinese wipe everybody out. You know, that's the question, you know, is that for the meantime, the next 5 or so years, you know, who's going to be around, you know, and an open source printer, that's the nice thing about it, is that, you know, you can be assured much more readily that, you know, you'll be able to get parts for it in some way, shape, or form. You know, from support groups and forums and all that stuff, because it's open source. So, you know, your chances are better off going for an open source printer in the long run, given the state of the industry right now. So you got to keep that in mind, you know, that this industry is, you know, in a state of development. But like I said, yeah, anytime you back something on Kickstarter, you know, you're going to have that problem, and that's why I certainly read a lot of those Kickstarter reviews, and, you know, that really, those backer reviews, and I can understand a lot of people are upset, but my advice is, don't be too upset. That's the nature of the game. I mean, it just is. That's Kickstarter for you. Chances are really good, and especially the more complex an item, the more likely it is you're going to, you know, get something with some flaws in it. You know, you know, and in this case, it had quite a few flaws in it. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, when any business is starting out, they almost always go through, and this is a big secret, but they almost always go through defective products. They almost always have big problems, no matter how small of a company or how large. If you don't believe me, just go look at all the product recalls, on Sears bulletin board, in their service department. The fact of the matter is, I don't care how big of a company you are, if you're Black & Decker or whatever, I mean, the amount of product defects out there in the first article, or an early run, tend to be pretty huge. I mean, it just happens, and it's unfortunate, but in the end, that's what Kickstarter's supposed to be about, is helping somebody get off the ground. And I do think that, at least from the product standpoint, again, I don't know the people that run the company personally, never met them, never talked to them, or that own Robo3D. I mean, I don't know if they're good guys or bad guys or what, but I do know they seem to have a pretty halfway decent product here. That's what I do know. And, and Kickstarter made that happen. And that's good. It'd be nice if they could kind of take care of the Kickstarter backers. But then again, when you're going through this, the thing about it is, you think that, oh, these guys are probably rolling in dough. They're probably making money hand over fist and, borrowing Mercedes and stuff. Well, maybe they are. Some people do that. But then again, I can tell you, if these guys are really serious about growth, they don't have any money. Because frankly, you're going to spend the first several years in the path they're on, tying all your income up in growth. I mean, it happens. Whether you got bank loans or not or whatever, is irrelevant. It still ties up almost all your capital. You don't do too well when you're a manufacturer for the first several years, up to, even up to, 3 or 4 years, into it. You start to get the hang of things, certainly after the first couple of years, because they're the most brutal. But, things do get better, and I still think these guys have a good product. They do have to work on their tech support. They should actually have, email responses, especially during normal business hours, within a couple hours, not a couple of days, and so forth. And I have not, by the way, even joined the user forums yet. I dealt exclusively with Robo3D in all this, because my feeling is it's their responsibility. I'm going to make them own up to it, or I'm going to give them a bad review on Amazon. It's what it boils down to, and so like I said, but I do think the product is halfway decent. I had a good experience with it, and it was a genuinely good experience, even though it was rocky and it shouldn't have been rocky. The fact of the matter is, overall, the product itself actually performs really well, with the exception of the leaking extruder and fan. But again, I think it was a worthwhile product, and I'm thrilled, that it's working like it is. So anyway, if you have this problem, again, review my videos on how to repair it, because they'll probably send you a similar kit like they sent me. And but it's not too difficult. It's not brain surgery. There's some parts that could be easier. It would be nice, I actually tried to get them to send me a whole X-axis assembly, is what I tried to do, at first, because I thought that would be easier for the average person. It's a non-engineer, because their whole X-axis is a carriage that actually just slides off these rods, and then you just have to undo some connectors at the controller and just replace the whole thing. I thought that would actually be easier for the average person, but it still wasn't too bad. And I do got to tell you, if you do buy one of these printers, at some point you're going to have to do this anyway. At some point you're going to have an extruder that you got to replace or something. So it just sucks if you've got one of these bad defective units that are out there, that I'm sure have been weeded off the shelves by now and probably sitting on people's Christmas trees, but hopefully there's not that many of them, hopefully there's not that many of them, but the fact of the matter is, if you've got one, well, it can be fixed, is what I'm trying to say, because I'm trying to evaluate this thing in the context of how an average person might think about it, not an engineer. The thing about me is, I may be an engineer, but I don't like things that are a pain in the ass. That's why I'm also an inventor, because I don't like things that are a pain in the ass. But this pain in the ass was still worth it in the end. So, anyway, like I said, if you have that problem, though, my videos are out there on YouTube, and so, look them up. They're rather lengthy, just like this one is. probably longer, but we'll see after editing. But the fact of the matter is that should, tell you what you need to know and give you some further insight into actually how to use the thing too. So anyway, thank you for your time, and good day.